Dive deeper, Damien. Lies don't float.
The birthday cake cost $300. I know because I paid for it, just like I paid for everything else at Elena's 42nd birthday party. The irony wasn't lost on me. Funding my own public execution with a smile plastered on my face like frosting on overpriced pastry. "Jack, honey, why don't you sit over there with the other guests?" Elena's voice dripped with false sweetness as she gestured toward the far end of the long table at the Riverside Social Club. Her manicured finger pointed away from her, away from the seat I'd naturally moved toward. The seat beside my wife of 15 years. The seat that Damien Cross immediately claimed with a smirk that made my jaw clench. "Sure thing, sweetheart," I replied, my voice steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. 23 pairs of eyes watched this little dance, including my own parents who'd driven 3 hours to be here. My mother's face had that pinched look she got when she was trying not to say something that would start a family war. Damien settled into what should have been my chair, his expensive cologne mixing with the scent of Elena's perfume in a way that made my stomach turn. He wore a watch I'd never seen before, a Rolex that probably cost more than most people's cars, the kind of watch a construction company owner like me would never buy, even if I could afford it. "Beautiful party, Elena," Damien said, his voice carrying that practiced charm that had probably worked on half the women in this room. "You look absolutely stunning." My wife preened under his attention. I liked his talk about me, her hand touching his arm in a gesture that lasted exactly 3 seconds too long to be innocent. Around the table, Elena's family and friends nodded their approval like a Greek chorus of enablers. "Oh, Damien, you always know exactly what to say," Elena laughed. That musical sound she used to reserve for me back when we were young and stupid enough to believe in forever. "Jack, did you remember to bring the gift?" Absolutely at the table stopped. The silence stretched like a rubber band, about to snap while I reached into my jacket pocket. The small wrapped box felt heavier than it should have, considering what was inside. "Of course," I said, standing up and walking the length of the table. My work boots felt loud against the polished floor, each step echoing in the sudden quiet. "Happy birthday, Elena." She took the box with the kind of smile she used for clients she didn't particularly like, but needed to impress. Her fingers worked at the ribbon with practiced efficiency, while everyone leaned forward slightly, curiosity getting the better of their manners. Inside the box, nestled in white tissue paper, was a single key. "What's this for?" Elena asked, holding it up to catch the light from the chandelier above us. "It's the key to our safe deposit box," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "The one with our marriage certificate, insurance policies, and all those important documents we've been keeping together for 15 years. His smile flickered like a candle in the wind. "Jack, what are you—" "Relinquish. I'm giving you access to everything," I continued, my tone conversational, almost cheerful. "Because I figure you'll need it for the divorce proceedings. It'll be a Dialorse hit the room like a physical force." Someone's wine glass clinked against their plate. Veronica, Elena's business partner and best friend since college, made a small, choking sound. Damien's smirk vanished completely. "Jack, you're being ridiculous," Elena said, but her voice had lost that confident edge. "Sit down. You're making a scene." "Oh, I'm just getting started with the scene," I replied, reaching for the massive birthday cake that dominated the center of the table. 3 layers of chocolate and vanilla with "Happy Birthday, Elena," written in elegant script across the top. "See, I've been thinking about this moment for weeks now. Planning it, you might say." Elena's mother, a woman who'd never liked me and had never bothered to hide it, stood up abruptly. "Now see here, young man." "Smargaret," I said without looking at her. "This doesn't concern you. Yet." The cake was heavier than I'd expected, but adrenaline has a way of making both hands, feeling the smooth fondant under my fingers. And for just a moment, I savored the absolute terror in Elena's eyes. "You wanted a memorable birthday party," I said, looking directly at my wife while holding $300 worth of cake and humiliation above Damien's perfectly styled head. "Hope you like the entertainment." The cake hit Damien with a satisfying splat that sent chocolate frosting flying in every direction. He screamed, actually screamed, as chunks of cake slid down his face and onto his $1,000 suit. The impact knocked him backward in his chair, arms flailing as he tried to wipe cake from his eyes. But I wasn't finished. Above the main table, the party planners had hung a giant inflatable decoration shaped like the number 42. It bobbed gently in the air conditioning, held in place by silver ribbons. I grabbed the cake knife from the table, a real knife, not one of those useless plastic things, and in one smooth motion, I drove it straight up into the balloon. The pop was like a gunshot in the enclosed space. Confetti that had been packed inside the decoration exploded outward, raining down on everyone like colorful snow. People screamed, ducked, covered their wine glasses with their hands as bits of paper and metallic streamers settled on their expensive clothes and carefully styled hair. In the chaos, I climbed onto my chair, then onto the table itself, standing among the scattered plates and overturned glasses. My work boots crunched on fallen confetti as I looked out over the wreckage of Elena's perfect party. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice cutting through the noise and confusion, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight, for witnessing this moment. For 15 years, I've watched my wife turn into someone I don't recognize, someone who thinks she's too good for the man who built her the life she wanted to escape from." Elena stood frozen. Cake frosting splattered across her designer dress, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I've watched her friends, our friends, treat me like hired help at my own dinner table. I've smiled and nodded while her family made jokes about my job, my clothes, my truck, everything about me that wasn't good enough for their precious Elena. Unleashed, Damien was still trying to get cake out of his hair, his expensive watch now decorated with chocolate frosting. He looked like a child who'd face-planted in his birthday cake, except children usually looked happier about it. "But tonight," I continued, "tonight I realized something important. I don't have to take it anymore. I don't have to pretend this marriage is working. I don't have to fund my own humiliation and call it love." I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. "Smile, everyone. This is going straight to social media. Elena's big birthday bash. Exactly as memorable as she wanted it to be." Themselves camera flash went off 3 times before anyone thought to move. By then, I'd already jumped down from the table and was walking toward the exit, my boots crunching through the confetti carpet I'd created. "Jack!" Elena's voice cracked like a whip behind me. "Jack, get back here. You can't just—" Submerged at the door and turned around one last time. Elena stood in the wreckage of her party, frosting in her hair, her face flushed with embarrassment and rage. Damien sat slumped in his chair, looking like he'd been hit by a truck instead of a cake. The other guests stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. "Happy birthday, Elena," I said, giving her the same fake smile she'd been giving me for months. "Hope you got everything you wished for." The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, cutting off the chaos I'd left behind. Outside in the parking lot, the cool evening air felt like freedom against my face. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the pure adrenaline rush of finally fighting back. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Mike answered on the second ring. "Mike, it's Jack. Remember what you said about Elena and that gym owner?" I paused, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos still coming from inside the restaurant. "You were right. Time to start digging. Deep." Torino had been a cop for 20 years before a bullet in the knee convinced him that private investigation offered better hours and fewer people shooting at him. He still looked like a cop, though. Thick shoulders, suspicious eyes, and the kind of mustache that belonged in a 1980s action movie. "You sure you want to go down this road?" he asked, sliding a manila folder across the table at Denny's where we'd agreed to meet. "Once you see what's in here, there's no going back to pretending everything's fine." I opened the folder and immediately wished I hadn't. The first photograph showed Elena and Damien kissing outside his apartment building. The timestamp read, 3 days before her birthday party. The second photo showed them going into the building together. The third showed Elena leaving the next morning, wearing the same clothes from the night before. "How long?" I asked, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "Best I can tell, about 4 months, maybe longer." Mike stirred sugar into his coffee with mechanical precision. "Started right around the time she joined that fancy gym of his. You know, the one with the juice bar and the personal trainers who look like underwear models. 4 months, a third of a year. Well, I'd been working 60-hour weeks to keep her agency afloat during their slow season. She'd been working out with her high school boyfriend who'd somehow transformed himself from small-town nobody into successful businessman. "There's more," Mike said, flipping to the next section of photos. "They've been meeting at that lakeside cottage his company owns, the one he uses for business retreats. Except the only business they're conducting involves a lot of champagne and very few clothes." The photos were grainy but clear enough. Elena's car parked next to Damien's BMW. The two of them on the cottage deck, his hands places they shouldn't be if she was still married to someone else. Elena laughing at something he said, her head thrown back in a way that made my chest tight with memories of better times. "I need more than pictures," I said, closing the folder before I could see any more. "I need something that'll hurt them both where it counts." Mike's grin was all Hunter. "Funny you should mention that. See, I did some digging into Mr. Cross's business practices. Turns out, his gym empire isn't quite as solid as he likes people to think." He pulled out a second folder, this one thicker than the first. 3 of his locations are behind on rent. His main investor pulled out last month after some irregularities in the books. And that fancy apartment of his? He's 2 months behind on the mortgage. So he's broke? Getting there fast. Which explains why he's suddenly so interested in reconnecting with your wife. Elena's agency has been doing pretty well, hasn't it? Especially since you've been helping with the finances. Clicked together in my mind like a puzzle I should have solved months ago. Elena's sudden interest in getting back in shape. Her new wardrobe of expensive gym clothes. The way she'd started asking detailed questions about our investments and business accounts. "He's using her," I said. "And she's using you to fund it," Mike confirmed. "Classic con game. Make the mark feel special while you empty their pockets. Except in this case, Elena doesn't realize she's being played too." I sentenced in the booth, processing this information. Outside the window, normal people were going about their normal lives. Driving to work, walking their dogs, buying groceries. None of them had just discovered their marriage was a lie being used to finance their wife's affair with a broke con artist. "What's your next move?" Mike asked. "I want to know everything. Where they go, what they talk about, who else knows. And Mike?" I met his eyes across the table. "I want to know what they're planning. Because people like this always have a plan." 3 days later, I was crouched behind a dumpster in the parking garage of Damien's apartment building, feeling like an idiot and a detective at the same time. Mike had taught me the basics of surveillance, which apparently consisted of being uncomfortable for long periods while drinking too much coffee from a thermos. "Rule number 1, he'd said. Everyone's dirty if you look hard enough. Rule number 2, assume you're being watched too. Rule number 3, people are predictable. They'll do the same stupid things in the same stupid ways until you can set your watch by their stupidity." Anywhere at 8:47 p.m., right on schedule, Elena's silver Lexus pulled into the garage. She parked in the visitor spot closest to the elevator, the same spot she'd used for the past week, according to Mike's surveillance notes. She sat in the car for almost 5 minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, before finally getting out. She looked beautiful, even crouched behind a dumpster, furious and heartbroken. I had to admit that. She'd always been the pretty one in our relationship, the one who turned heads when we walked into restaurants. Tonight, she wore a red dress I'd never seen before and heels that clicked against the concrete like a countdown timer. The elevator doors closed behind her, and I made my move. Damien's BMW sat in his assigned spot, like a monument to his fake success. Midnight blue with chrome accents and rims that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The kind of car a man bought when he needed everyone to know he was important. I'd come prepared. The bag of sugar in my jacket pocket had cost me $3 at the grocery store. The note I'd written earlier was folded neatly in my other pocket. Both were about to become very expensive for Damien Cross. Getting the gas cap open was easier than I'd expected. Pouring the sugar took less than 30 seconds. Replacing the cap and leaving the note under his windshield wiper took another 15 seconds. Total time for the operation? Less than a minute. The note was simple. Real men don't cheat on their wives with broke losers. Enjoy the walk home. A friend. I was halfway back to my hiding spot when the security guard appeared. "Hey, what are you doing over there?" The guard was young, maybe 25, with the kind of eager expression that said he took his job very seriously. He had his hand on his radio and was walking toward me with purpose. "Just looking for my car," I said, trying to sound confused rather than guilty. Thought I parked over here, but I guess I was wrong. This is resident parking only, the guard said, getting closer. You need to be in visitor parking. Right, of course. My mistake. I started walking toward the visitor section, but the guard wasn't buying it. He followed me, talking into his radio about a possible vehicle tampering situation in Section B. Battlefield dinged behind us. There a problem here? Damien's voice carried across the garage, full of authority and irritation. He emerged from the elevator with Elena beside him, both of them looking like they'd been interrupted during something important. The security guard straightened up. Found this guy messing around near your car, Mr. Cross. Says he was looking for his vehicle, but he was definitely doing something to your BMW. Damien's eyes narrowed as he looked at me. For a moment, I thought he might not recognize me. It had been dim lighting at the restaurant, and I'd been covered in cake frosting for most of our interaction. But then, his expression shifted to something between amusement and anger. Well, well, if it isn't the birthday party entertainer. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jack? What are you doing here? Just leaving, I said, backing toward the exit. Lovely evening for a drive, don't you think? The security guard looked confused, glancing between the three of us like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Do you know this man, Mr. Cross? Damien said. He's Elena's soon-to-be ex-husband. Apparently, he's having some trouble accepting reality. I'm accepting it just fine, I replied. In fact, I'm embracing it. You two have a wonderful evening. Try not to spend too much money you don't have. I made it to the exit before Damien could respond, but I heard Elena calling my name as the stairwell door closed behind me. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon, but underneath the adrenaline was something I hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. Text message from an unknown number. We know what you did. Back off or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, Let's see who regrets what. The response came immediately. This is just the beginning. I started my truck and pulled out of the parking garage, checking my mirrors for any sign of pursuit. The streets were quiet, normal people heading home from normal evenings with normal problems. I envied them. But as I drove through the familiar neighborhoods of our small city, past the houses where normal couples lived normal lives, I realized I didn't want to go back to normal. Normal had been slowly eliminating me for months, maybe years. Normal had been pretending not to notice the distance growing between Elena and me. Normal had been making excuses for her coldness, her criticism, her gradual transformation from partner to adversary. My phone rang. Mike's number. How'd it go? He asked. Phase 1 complete. They know I'm not going to just disappear quietly. Good, because I've got news about Phase 2. That cottage I mentioned? They're planning something big there this weekend. Veronica's involved, and so is Elena's assistant. Whatever they're cooking up, it's not just about the affair anymore. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the house Elena and I had bought together 8 years ago. We'd been happy then, or at least I thought we had been. We'd talked about children, about growing old together, about all the dreams that seem possible when you're young and stupid enough to believe in forever. Jack, you there? Yeah, I'm here. What do you need me to do? Be ready to move fast. And Jack, whatever they're planning, it's going to hurt. These people aren't just cheating on you. They're setting you up for something bigger. Something that'll leave you with nothing. I had interceptions, at the life I'd built and was about to lose, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Then I guess we better make sure they lose everything first. Fall Festival happened every October, transforming our town square into something that looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, if Norman Rockwell had been into craft beer and overpriced artisanal soap. Elena's PR agency had been handling the event promotion for 3 years running, which meant she'd be there in her professional capacity, playing the role of successful businesswoman for the local media. It also meant she'd have to be polite to me in public, no matter how much she wanted to scratch my eyes out. I'd spent the morning setting up my construction company's booth. We sponsored the children's activities every year, building a small playground that the kids could use during the festival. It was good publicity and genuinely fun work, the kind of thing that reminded me why I'd started my own business in the first place. Uncle Jack, can you make the slide higher? Sarah, my business partner Tom's 8-year-old daughter, tugged on my sleeve with the kind of insistence only children could muster. Higher means more dangerous, kiddo, I said, checking the bolts on the slide supports. Your dad would eliminate me if you got hurt on my playground. But danger is fun. Spoken like a true 8-year-old. I ruffled her hair and handed her a plastic hammer. Here, help me with these safety rails. Make them extra strong. The festival officially opened at noon, but people had been wandering through since 10 a.m., drawn by the smell of funnel cakes and the sound of the local high school band practicing their halftime show. By 11:30, the square was packed with families, teenagers, and the kind of older couples who treated community events like social obligations. That's when I spotted Elena. She stood near the main stage, clipboard in hand, directing the setup crew with the kind of efficient authority she brought to everything. She wore jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Her hair pulled back in a ponytail that managed to look both casual and perfectly styled. Damien stood beside her, playing the role of supportive boyfriend with an Oscar-worthy performance. He carried her coffee, nodded at the right moments, and generally acted like a man who belonged in her world. To anyone who didn't know better, they looked like the perfect couple. "Showtime," I muttered, pulling out my phone. The photos Mike had taken were stored in a secure folder, waiting for the right moment. The right moment, as it turned out, was when Elena stepped up to the microphone for the festival's opening ceremony. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 23rd Annual Riverside Fall Festival. Her voice carried clearly across the square, amplified by the sound system her agency had installed. We have an amazing day planned for you, with activities for the whole family, local vendors, and of course, our famous pie-eating contest at 3 o'clock. The crowd applauded politely. Parents corralled children, teenagers clustered around the game booths, and the local newspaper photographer snapped pictures for next week's edition. I opened the photo folder and selected the clearest shot of Elena and Damien kissing outside his apartment. Then I opened the town's Facebook page, the one everyone used to share news, gossip, and complaints about snow removal, and uploaded the photo with a simple caption. Looks like some people are getting more than exercise at Cross Fitness. Guess the marriage vows didn't include a gym membership clause. The reaction was immediate. Phones started buzzing throughout the crowd as people received notifications. Heads turned toward screens, conversations stopped mid-sentence, and a ripple of whispers spread through the square like a wave. Elena, oblivious to the digital chaos erupting around her, continued her speech. This year's festival is dedicated to celebrating community, family values, and the bonds that hold us together through good times and challenging times alike. Someone in the crowd snorted with laughter. Then another person giggled. Within 30 seconds, half the audience was looking at their phones instead of the stage. "Mom, why is everyone laughing?" A child's voice carried clearly in the suddenly charged atmosphere. That's when Elena noticed something was wrong. Her confident smile faltered as she looked out at an audience that was no longer paying attention to her carefully prepared remarks. She glanced at Damien, who was staring at his own phone with an expression of growing horror. Is everything all right?" Elena asked into the microphone, her professional composure starting to crack. "Just fine," I called out from my booth, my voice carrying across the square. "Don't mind us. Please, continue telling everyone about family values and the bonds that hold us together. We're all very interested in your perspective on commitment." Elena's eyes found me in the crowd, and the look she gave me could have melted steel. But she was trapped. The microphone was live, the crowd was watching, and walking away would only make things worse. "As I was saying," she continued, her voice slightly strained, "this festival represents the best of our community spirit." "Speaking of community spirit," I interrupted, stepping out from behind my booth, "I think we should all give a round of applause to Damien Cross, owner of Cross Fitness. He's been working very hard to keep our local wives fit, engaged now, sensing drama in the way people always do when someone else's private business becomes public entertainment. Phones were out everywhere, recording what was clearly about to become the most talked about moment in festival history. Damien stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Jack. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I pulled out my own phone and held it up so the crowd could see. "Because I've got about 40 more photos that say otherwise. Would you like me to share them with everyone?" Or should we keep this between friends? Jack, stop this right now, Elena hissed into the microphone, apparently forgetting it was still live. Her voice echoed across the square, making her sound shrill and desperate. Stop what? Telling the truth? Sharing news about our local business owners? I thought your agency was all about transparency and community engagement. That's when Damien made his mistake. He stepped off the stage and started walking toward me, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted with rage. The crowd sensed violence coming and started backing away, creating a circle around us like we were about to have a gunfight at high noon. You want to do this here? He said, stopping about 10 feet away from me. In front of everyone? I think everyone deserves to know what kind of man you really are, I replied. For instance, did you know that Cross Fitness has been buying illegal steroids from a supplier in Mexico? Or that 3 of his gym locations are behind on their rent because he's been using membership fees to fund his lifestyle? Damien's face went white. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. See, I've been doing some research. Turns out when you dig into someone's business practices, you find all sorts of interesting information. Tax records, supplier invoices, employee complaints filed with the labor board. I opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. One Mike had taken of Damien meeting with a man in the parking lot of a truck stop outside town. Money and a small package changing hands in broad daylight. This is Tony Reeves, I announced to the crowd. He's been selling performance-enhancing pills to gyms throughout the state. Guess which gym owner has been his best customer for the past 2 years? Damien lunged at me. I'd been expecting it. Angry men are predictable, especially when their secrets are being exposed in front of half the town. I sidestepped his charge, stuck out my foot, and watched as momentum carried him face first into the dunk tank that had been set up for the children's activities. The splash was magnificent. Water exploded in every direction as Damien hit the surface. His expensive clothes instantly soaked, his carefully styled hair plastered to his head like seaweed. He came up sputtering and gasping, looking like a drowned rat in designer jeans. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Children pointed and giggled. Teenagers whooped and cheered, and adults tried to look disapproving while clearly enjoying every second of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, taking a bow, Damien Cross, fitness expert and pharmaceutical enthusiast. Give him a hand, folks. He really knows how to make a splash. Elena was screaming into the microphone, but the sound system had been turned off. She stood on the stage looking helpless and furious, her perfect festival ruined, her reputation in tatters, her boyfriend dripping wet and humiliated in front of everyone she'd ever tried to impress. This isn't over, Damien snarled, hauling himself out of the dunk tank. You have no idea what you've just started. Actually, I think I'm finishing something, I replied. Something that should have ended a long time ago. That's when the police arrived. Officer Martinez had been working crowd control for the festival, but someone had called in a disturbance. He looked at the scene. The soaking wet Damien, the angry crowd, Elena standing on stage looking like her world had just collapsed, and sighed, the kind of sigh that said he'd rather be anywhere else. What's going on here? He asked. Just a little community education, I said. Nothing illegal about sharing public information at a public event. Wireless, he attacked me. Damien pointed at me with a shaking finger. I want him arrested. Officers Martinez looked at the crowd of witnesses, all of whom had seen Damien charge at me first. Looks like you fell in the dunk tank, sir. Accidents happen at festivals. Maybe you should go home and get into some dry clothes. This is ridiculous. He's stalking us, maltreating us, destroying property. Administer, what property? Martinez asked. The dunk tank seems fine. Your pride doesn't count as property damage. Restless voice. Jack, we need to talk. Privately. I don't think we have anything private to discuss anymore, I replied. In fact, I think everything should be public from now on. Transparency, remember? It's what your agency is all about. I turned to address the crowd one more time. Folks, I want to thank you all for coming to the festival today. I hope you've enjoyed the entertainment. There's more where that came from, so stay tuned to social media. You won't want to miss what happens next. As I walked away, I could hear Elena calling my name, her voice cracking with desperation. Damien was still dripping, still ranting about lawsuits and revenge. The crowd was already dispersing, but their phones were out, uploading videos and photos to every social media platform they could find. By the time I reached my truck, the hashtag #DunkTankDamien was already trending locally. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Saw the live streams. Nice work. But you better be ready for them to hit back hard. People like this don't go down without a fight. Expelled the truck and pulled away from the festival, leaving behind the chaos I'd created. In my rearview mirror, I could see Elena and Damien arguing on the stage, their body language screaming mutual accusation and blame. Phase 2 complete. But Mike was right. This was far from over. They were going to come for me now, and they weren't going to play fair. Good thing I'd never been much for playing fair either. The lakeside cottage sat on 3 acres of prime real estate, about 20 miles outside town, hidden behind a wall of pine trees and the kind of privacy that money could buy. According to the county records Mike had pulled, it belonged to Cross Fitness LLC and was listed as a corporate retreat facility for tax purposes. What the tax records didn't mention was that it had been Elena and Damien's love nest for the past 4 months.
"You sure about this?" Pete asked from the passenger seat of my truck. My younger brother had driven up from Portland when I'd called him, no questions asked, bringing with him a toolbox full of equipment I probably didn't want to know the legal status of. "I'm sure they're planning something big," I replied, cutting the headlights as we turned onto the narrow dirt road that led to the cottage. Mike's been tracking their communications. They're not just having an affair anymore. They're coordinating something. Something that involves Elena's business partner, her assistant, and a lot of paperwork. "And you think the evidence is in there?" "I think they feel safe there. Safe enough to leave things lying around they wouldn't leave anywhere else." The cottage appeared through the trees like something out of a vacation rental brochure. Rustic cedar siding, wraparound porch, picture windows facing the lake. Elena's Lexus and Damien's BMW were parked in the circular driveway, which meant they were inside, probably having a romantic dinner while planning my financial destruction. We parked a quarter-mile away and walked back through the woods, Pete carrying his toolkit like a professional burglar, me carrying the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing I was about to cross several legal lines I'd never crossed before. "There," Pete whispered, pointing to a basement window on the side of the cottage facing away from the lake. "Looks like it's just latched, not locked. Give me 2 minutes." My brother had spent his teenage years getting into places he wasn't supposed to be, a skill that had gotten him arrested twice, and eventually motivated him to become a legitimate locksmith and security consultant. Tonight, his misspent youth was about to pay dividends. The window opened with barely a sound. Pete slipped through first, then helped me down into what turned out to be a finished basement with a wet bar, leather furniture, and the kind of romantic lighting that made me want to punch something. "Cozy," Pete muttered. "Your wife's got expensive taste in infidelity locations." One could hear voices upstairs, Elena's laugh, Damien's deeper tones, the clink of wine glasses and the sound of music playing softly. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, completely unaware that their private sanctuary had been compromised. The basement had been converted into an office space, with filing cabinets, a desk covered in papers, and a laptop computer that was still open and logged in. Apparently, Damien's security consciousness didn't extend to password protection. "Jackpot," I whispered, settling into the desk chair while Pete kept watch at the window. The laptop contained a treasure trove of information that made my hands shake as I scrolled through it. Email threads between Elena and Damien going back 6 months, discussing not just their affair, but detailed plans for what they called the transition. Financial documents showing how Elena had been gradually moving money out of our joint accounts into accounts controlled by her business. Draft divorce papers that would leave me with almost nothing, while claiming I'd been abusive, unfaithful, and financially irresponsible. But the most damning evidence was in a folder labeled Insurance. Elena had taken out a life insurance policy on me 3 months ago. $2 million, with her as the sole beneficiary. The application listed me as having a drinking problem, a history of depression, and access to dangerous construction equipment. All lies, but lies that would look believable if something unfortunate happened to me. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, staring at the screen. "What?" Pete moved away from the window, concern in his voice. "They're not just planning to divorce me, they're planning to eliminate me." The footsteps on the floor above us stopped. The music cut off abruptly. Elena's voice, sharp with concern. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Damien's voice, slightly slurred. They'd been drinking. "Something downstairs. Like a voice. Probably the TV. I left it on earlier." But the footsteps were moving toward the stairs that led to the basement. We had maybe 30 seconds before they discovered us. I grabbed a flash drive from Pete's toolkit and jammed it into the laptop's USB port, copying everything I could while Pete gathered up the most incriminating papers from the desk. The file transfer seemed to take forever, the progress bar crawling across the screen while Elena's heels clicked on the wooden stairs. "There's definitely someone down here," she called back to Damien. "I can see light from the computer." The flash drive finished copying just as Elena's silhouette appeared at the bottom of the stairs. For a moment, we all froze. Elena in her silk blouse and designer jeans, me sitting at Damien's desk with stolen files in my hands, Pete standing by the window like a burglar caught in the act. "Hello, Elena," I said, ejecting the flash drive and slipping it into my pocket. "Lovely evening for a romantic getaway." "Justin?" Her voice was a mixture of shock, fear, and fury. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "Shields. Same way you got into my bank accounts," I replied, standing up slowly. "Through an unlocked window of opportunity." Damien appeared behind her, and his face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, and then something that looked almost like relief. "Well, well," he said, starting down the stairs. "Breaking and entering now? That's a felony, Jack. You're looking at serious jail time." "Time out. So is insurance fraud," I replied, holding up a printed copy of the policy application. $2 million? Really? You couldn't even wait until I was actually dead to start spending it? Elena's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you don't know about the forged financial documents, the fake misuse allegations, or the plan to have me declared mentally unstable so you can take control of my business assets." Damien was halfway down the stairs now, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was bigger than me, younger, in better shape thanks to his steroid habit. In his mind, the solution to this problem was simple: overpower me, take the evidence, and probably throw me in the lake with some concrete boots. "Pete," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off Damien, "now would be good." My brother pulled a small Canusicians to check the lake and description. My brother pulled a small crystal Cass. My brother pulled into a few things over of the track at the second. What things like this? Me remember than it's. Let's me. My brother pulled at everything that I figure that now. I was faithfully to go to the fact that normally, brother pulled a small canister from his toolkit and sprayed it directly into Damien's face. Pepper spray, military grade, the kind that could drop a charging bear. Damien screamed and tumbled backward, clawing at his eyes, his expensive shirt torn as he crashed into the wall. Elena screamed too, but hers was pure rage. "You fool! You can't just break into private property and attack people." "Watch me," I said, moving toward the window. "Oh, and Elena, you might want to check your business email tomorrow. I sent copies of everything to your board of directors, your biggest clients, and that reporter from the newspaper who's been investigating insurance fraud in the county. You're lying." Shelter up my phone, showing her the sent messages folder. "Am I?" That's when Damien's friends arrived. The sound of car doors slamming and heavy footsteps on the porch meant our window of opportunity, literally and figuratively, was closing fast. Pete was already halfway through the basement window, but I could hear voices upstairs. Multiple men with the kind of voices that belong to people who solved problems with their fists. "Damien!" one of them called. "You okay down there?" Damien gasped, still rubbing pepper spray from his eyes. "Don't let them leave!" I dove through the window just as the first of Damien's muscle-bound friends appeared at the top of the stairs. Pete grabbed my arm and hauled me to my feet, and we ran through the woods like our lives depended on it. Which, considering what we'd just discovered, they probably did. Behind us, flashlight beams cut through the darkness and men shouted instructions to each other. They were organized, systematic, the kind of people who'd done this before. But Pete and I knew these woods from childhood camping trips, and we reached my truck while they were still crashing through the underbrush 100 yards behind us. I started the engine and pulled away without headlights,
navigating by moonlight until we reached the main road. Only then did I turn on the lights and accelerate toward town, my heart pounding like a jackhammer in my chest. "That was fun," Pete said, checking the side mirror for pursuit. "Remind me never to let you talk me into anything like this again." "It's not over yet," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Mike, it's Jack. We got it. Everything. And it's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Homicide worse. They were planning to eliminate me for the insurance money." The line was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Where are you now?" "Heading back to town." "Don't go home. Don't go anywhere they'd expect you to be. They're going to be desperate now, and desperate people do stupid things." I looked at Pete, who nodded grimly. "Any suggestions?" "Yeah. Time to turn this from defense to offense. Meet me at the office in an hour, and Jack, bring everything you found. Tomorrow, we're going to destroy them." Elena's PR agency occupied the top floor of the Riverside Commerce Center. All glass walls and modern furniture designed to impress clients with money to spend on image management. I'd been there exactly 3 times in the 5 years since she'd started the business. Twice for Christmas parties, and once to fix a plumbing problem the building maintenance couldn't handle. Today would be my 4th and final visit. "You sure this is going to work?" Pete asked from the passenger seat as we pulled into the parking garage. It was 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, early enough that most of the building's tenants wouldn't arrive for another hour, but late enough that Elena and her staff would be there preparing for their weekly board meeting. "It'll work," I replied, checking my phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Elena's creatures of habit. Every Tuesday at 8 a.m., she meets with Veronica and the other partners to review accounts and plan strategy. They'll all be in the main conference room, the one with the glass walls facing the elevator. "You're sure Mike got the audio equipment installed?" "He's been working building security for 6 months. Trust me, that conference room is wired better than a recording studio." The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like ascending to my own execution. But when the doors opened, I felt nothing but cold determination. Elena had made this personal when she decided to have me eliminated for insurance money. Now it was time to show her what personal really looked like. The agency's reception area was empty. Elena's receptionist didn't start until 9, but I could hear voices from the conference room. Elena's laugh, Veronica's nasal whine, and 2 other voices I recognized as junior partners who'd never liked me, but had always been polite to my face. I walked through the reception area like I owned the place. Pete behind me, carrying a briefcase that contained copies of everything we'd found at the cottage. The conference room's glass walls meant they could see us coming, but by the time Elena looked up from her papers, we were already through the door. "Good morning, ladies," I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table, the chair Elena usually occupied. "Hope you don't mind if Pete and I sit in on today's meeting. We have some business to discuss." Elena's face cycled through several expressions: surprise, anger, fear, and finally, a kind of cold calculation that told me she was already planning her counterattack. "Jack, you can't just barge in here," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is a private business meeting." "Actually, it's about to become very public," I replied, opening Pete's briefcase and spreading documents across the polished conference table. "See, I've been doing some research into your business practices, and I've discovered some interesting irregularities," reckons Veronica, Elena's business partner and longtime enabler, leaned forward with the kind of fake concern she'd perfected over years of managing other people's crises. "Jack, I know you're going through a difficult time with the divorce, but this isn't the appropriate—" "Schlump, Veronica," I said pleasantly. "The adults are talking." Her mouth snapped closed like a trap, her eyes wide with shock. In all the years she'd known me, I'd never been anything but polite, even when she was making snide comments about my clothes or my truck or my general unsuitability as Elena's husband. "Now then," I continued, pulling out the first document, "let's start with the insurance fraud. Elena, would you like to explain to your partners why you took out a $2 million life insurance policy on your husband without his knowledge?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The 2 junior partners, Sarah and Michelle, both young, ambitious, and suddenly very interested in the conversation, exchanged glances that said they were already calculating how this scandal would affect their own careers. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because I have a copy of the application right here, signed with a very good forgery of my signature.
listing me as having a drinking problem and access to dangerous construction equipment. The kind of application that would make my accidental passing look very plausible to an insurance investigator. I slid the document across the table. Sarah picked it up, read it, and went pale. "Elena," she said quietly, "please tell me this isn't real." "It's real," I confirmed. Just like the emails between Elena and her boyfriend discussing how to make my end look accidental. Just like the financial documents showing how she's been systematically looting our joint accounts to fund her new life with a broke con artist who's been using her to pay his debts. "That's enough." Elena stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward into the glass wall. "You're trespassing, and you're making slanderous accusations. I want you out of here right now, or I'm calling security." "Ahead," I said, pulling out my phone. "But you should know that everything we're discussing is being recorded, audio and video, and it's being live-streamed to a very interested audience." Elena's face went white. "What?" I held up my phone, showing the live stream interface with a viewer count that was climbing rapidly. "Smile, everyone. You're live on the internet. Say hello to the viewers at home." The panic in the room was immediate and electric. Veronica started babbling about privacy laws and consent. The junior partners were frantically checking their own phones, and Elena looked like she might faint. "You can't do this," Elena whispered. "This is illegal. This is maltreatment." "Actually, this is justice," I replied. "And we're just getting started. Pete, would you like to share what we found at the cottage?" My brother opened a second folder and pulled out photographs. Elena and Damien in compromising positions. Financial documents, and most damaging of all, printed emails discussing their plan to have me declared mentally unstable so Elena could take control of my business assets. "Your wife and her boyfriend have been very busy," Pete said, his voice carrying the kind of working-class contempt that cut deeper than any insult. "Planning your passing, stealing your money, and setting up a whole new life with your assets. Real classy operation you've got here, ladies." Sarah and Michelle were reading the emails now, their expressions shifting from shock to disgust, to the kind of cold anger that came from realizing they'd been working for criminals. "We had no idea," Sarah said, looking directly at the phone camera. "For anyone watching this, I want to make it clear that the junior partners were not involved in any of these activities." "Neither was I," Veronica added quickly, throwing Elena under the bus with the speed of someone who'd had practice at self-preservation. Elena looked around the table at her partners, her friends, her employees, and saw nothing but abandonment and betrayal. The empire she'd built was crumbling in real time, and everyone was scrambling to get clear of the wreckage. "This isn't over," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You think you can destroy everything I've worked for? You think you can humiliate me and just walk away?" "Think I already have," I replied, standing up and collecting the documents. "Your business is finished, Elena. Your reputation is destroyed. Your boyfriend is broke and desperate, and your insurance fraud scheme is now public knowledge. What exactly do you think you have left to fight with?" This is when she made her final mistake. Elena grabbed a crystal paperweight from the conference table, an award the agency had won for excellence in crisis management, and hurled it at my head with all the fury of a woman watching her world collapse. I ducked. The paperweight shattered against the glass wall behind me, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. The sound was like a gunshot in the enclosed space, and the symbolism was perfect. Elena destroying her own glass house in a final act of desperate rage. "And there we have it," I said to the camera. "Elena Mercer, everyone. Crisis management expert and attempted butcher." Thank you for watching, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Unrestricted and pocketed my phone while Elena collapsed into her chair, sobbing with the kind of broken desperation that might have moved me to pity if I hadn't seen the insurance policy with my forged signature. "The police are already on their way," I said, heading for the door. "Mike called them about 10 minutes ago. Something about insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit homicide, and attack with a deadly weapon. You might want to call a lawyer, Elena. A good one." And I walked toward the elevator. I could hear Elena screaming my name, her voice echoing off the glass walls of her ruined kingdom. The sound followed us all the way down to the parking garage, a symphony of defeat that was almost as satisfying as the revenge itself. Almost. Because the best part was still to come. The Riverside County Courthouse steps had seen a lot of drama over the years, But nothing quite like the spectacle that unfolded on the morning of October 15th, when Elena Mercer's remaining assets went up for public auction. Divorce court had been swift and merciless. The evidence of fraud, infidelity, and conspiracy to commit homicide had made the proceedings less of a legal battle and more of a public execution. Elena's lawyer, an expensive shark from the state capitol, had tried to negotiate, but you can't negotiate with video evidence of your client planning your opponent's end. I got the house, the business assets, and most of the liquid investments. Elena got a criminal record and a court order to stay at least 500 feet away from me at all times. But the real satisfaction came from watching her prized possessions get sold to the highest bidder in front of half the town. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the bidding on this beautiful designer handbag collection at $500, announced Martha Stevens, the court-appointed auctioneer who'd been running estate sales in our county for 20 years. These are authentic designer pieces, barely used, perfect for the fashion-conscious buyer. Elena stood on the sidewalk across the street, technically within the legal distance, but close enough to watch every humiliating moment. She wore jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from whatever friend was still speaking to her, and looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. Damien was nowhere to be seen. According to Mike's sources, he'd fled town the day after the live-streamed boardroom confrontation, leaving behind unpaid debts, angry investors, and a gym empire that had collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. 500. Do I hear 600? Martha's voice carried across the courthouse square, where a surprisingly large crowd had gathered to witness Elena's downfall. 600 from the lady in the blue dress. Do I hear 7? Trim recognized most of the faces in the crowd. Neighbors, business associates, people who'd attended Elena's birthday party and witnessed the cake incident that had started this whole chain of events. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed to be enjoying the show. But all of them were there to see how the story ended. Sold for $800 to bidder number 47. Martha's gavel came down with a satisfying crack. Next item. We have a collection of designer shoes, sizes 7 and 8. Starting bid $300. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. Watching the live stream from Portland. This is better than cable TV. The local newspaper had sent a photographer, and someone was live streaming the entire auction on social media. Elena's public humiliation was being broadcast to anyone who cared to watch, which apparently included most of our small city and a surprising number of people from surrounding towns who'd heard about the scandal. Jack Mercer, theology. I turned to see Rita Williams, my divorce lawyer, approaching with a satisfied smile that told me she had good news. The criminal charges were filed this morning, she said, keeping her voice low so the crowd couldn't overhear. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit homicide, and attack. Elena's looking at 5 to 10 years if she's convicted on all counts. What about Damien? Still in the wind, she said. Still in the wind, but there's a warrant out for his arrest. The FBI got involved when they found evidence he was moving money across state lines. He can't run forever. The auction continued around us, Elena's life being sold off piece by piece to the highest bidder. Her jewelry, her art collection, her designer furniture, everything she'd accumulated during our marriage and after. All of it going to strangers who saw it as bargains rather than the symbols of status she'd believed them to be. Now we have a very special item, Martha announced, holding up a framed photograph. This appears to be a professional portrait of the defendant and her associate. Starting bid, $50. The photograph showed Elena and Damien at some charity event, both of them dressed to the nines and smiling like they owned the world. It was the kind of picture she'd probably planned to use for engagement announcements or society page features. $50, called out Carl, my elderly neighbor who'd never liked Elena and wasn't shy about showing it. I'll give you $50 for the frame. You can keep the picture. The crowd laughed, and I saw Elena flinch across the street like she'd been physically slapped. $50. Do I hear 75? Martha was clearly enjoying herself. Come on, folks, this is a piece of local history. Your grandchildren will want to know you are here for this. $100. The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see Tina, my office manager, waving her bidder number with a wicked grin. I want to hang it in the break room at work, right next to the dartboard. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Elena turned and walked away, finally unable to watch any more of her public dismantling.
Sold to bidder number 12 for $100. Martha's gavel came down again. I think that's a bargain for such a memorable piece of art. The auction continued for another hour, but the climax had already passed. Elena's car, a Lexus she'd bought with money stolen from our joint accounts, went for $15,000 to a young couple who probably had no idea of its history. Her designer clothes sold in lots to bargain hunters and curious onlookers. Even her expensive coffee machine found a new home with someone who appreciated good espresso more than the status symbol it represented. By noon, it was over. Elena's material life had been reduced to a pile of receipts and a check that would go toward paying her legal fees and the restitution she owed me for the stolen money. I stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the dispersing crowd, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but the kind of deep satisfaction that came from seeing justice served and accounts balanced. Mr. Mercer? A young woman with a press badge approached, her phone out and recording. Jenny Morrison from Channel 7 News. Could I get a statement about today's proceedings? I looked at the camera, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The birthday party humiliation, the discovery of the affair, the break-in at the cottage, the insurance fraud, the public confrontations, all of it building to this final, public reckoning. Elena wanted a memorable birthday party, I said finally. She wanted to be the center of attention, to have everyone watching her, to feel important and powerful and in control of her world. I paused, looking across the street to where Elena had been standing, though she was long gone now. Well, she got what she wanted. Everyone's watching. Everyone knows who she really is. And she'll be remembered for exactly as long as she deserves to be. Simmons, the reporter, asked a few more questions, but I was done talking. The story had been told. The justice had been served. And the accounts were finally balanced. As I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed with messages from friends, family, and even strangers who'd watched the live stream. Congratulations, support, and more than a few people asking if I was planning to write a book about the experience. Maybe I would. Maybe the world needed to hear about what happened when ordinary people finally stopped accepting the unacceptable and started fighting back. But first, I had a business to run and a life to rebuild. Elena had taken a lot from me, my trust, my peace of mind, my faith in the institution of marriage. But she hadn't taken everything. I still had my integrity. I still had my friends, the real ones who'd stood by me through the chaos. I still had my work, my skills, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. I started my truck and pulled away from the courthouse, leaving behind the wreckage of Elena's ambitions and the satisfied murmur of a crowd that had witnessed justice in action. In my rearview mirror, I could see Martha Stevens packing up her auction equipment. The courthouse steps empty, except for a few scattered pieces of paper blowing in the autumn wind. It was over. Finally, completely, satisfyingly over. Elena had wanted to dance at her birthday party, to be the belle of the ball while humiliating the husband she'd grown tired of. Instead, she'd gotten a different kind of dance entirely. A dance with consequences, with justice, with the kind of public accountability that followed you for the rest of your life. As for me, I was done dancing to anyone else's music. From now on, I'd be calling my own tune. And if that tune happened to sound like revenge served ice cold with a side of poetic justice, well, that was just fine by me. The last dance was over, and I was the only one left standing.